October this year, I went to Costa Rica. The first time I went to a place or a country outside of Europe. And therefore, since I am also always interested in cars, despite going there for the nature, the forests, and just the beauty of the country, I also wanted to share my thoughts about the cars and the car market there. So here's a video I made about Costa Rica's car industry. Unlike its larger neighbors, Costa Rica doesn't have a major car manufacturing base. Every car, from small sedans to pickup trucks or SUVs, is imported, and that means that the market depends entirely on what is affordable, reliable, and also easy to maintain. And that's where Asian brands dominate, and you can also easily see that on when you view the street as Toyota, Nissan, Hyundai, Suzuki, Kia, and Mitsubishi are basically everywhere. These brands hold most of the market because they are actually very durable and have lower maintenance costs, which matter enormously in Costa Rica's terrain and climate, and also for what people can spend over there. When you're looking at the roads, Costa Rica's roads are full of cars, in my opinion, from the 1990s and 2000s, and besides that, also some of even the 1980s. And basically, there are a few reasons for that. Here is why. The import costs are huge. As said before, Costa Rica basically has a market of cars which imports basically every car, as they don't make any cars their own. New vehicles face steep import taxes, often 50 to 80% of the car's value on top of basically the selling price, once duties and other fees are included, which means that a brand new Toyota Corolla that, for example, sells for $25,000 in the US could cost over $35,000 in Costa Rica, in which a country even has people with lower salaries, which even means that basically the affordability of cars are much lower over there. So many buyers turn to used cars, often imported from the US or Japan as well. Reliability is also a factor, as Asian vehicles, especially Japanese models, are famous for lasting 300,000 kilometers or more with basic maintenance. And specifically in a country where mechanics are skilled in repairing these brands and parts are plentiful, it makes sense to keep an older vehicle running rather than replace it by a new car, which is most of the time not even as reliable and also has a high pricing. Also, which I have seen on my own, road conditions also could be somewhat dependable, as outside of the capital, San Jose, many roads are steep, unpaved, or in poor conditions during the rainy season. I was there during the rainy season, and in my opinion, most of the roads had some potholes in them, and these potholes were placed on positions where you would even not think of, as you would be somewhat surprised by when they would turn up. Cars really need to be rugged and simple to fix in order to be able to drive on these roads, and basically that means to not be full of expensive electronic systems that might even fill in dust, or especially during the rainy season with humidity caused by the rain. And basically, these older Japanese SUVs and pickups fit this profile perfectly. European brands like BMW, Mercedes Benz, Volkswagen, or Peugeot do exist in Costa Rica, but they are extremely expensive to import. Basically, also because of the somewhat long distance between Europe and Costa Rica. The flight on itself from the Netherlands to Costa Rica was 12 hours, and that was even without the time in between the flights. Um, Also, maintenance and parts are costlier and less available, causing the car to even have higher maintenance despite its already heavier and higher price. And also, some electronic systems and also the possibility to have a lower ground clearance make these cars less practical on many rural roads outside of the cities. Even used European cars are often avoided because repair costs can outweigh their resale value, and therefore, basically, many people choose for these Asian cars. And as somebody from the Netherlands, the Costa Rican car industry is a lot different from, basically Europe's and the Netherlands on itself. The first thing that were different with Europe were these huge American trucks. As soon as I left the airport, I saw dozens of them, and it was very cool to see, and they also sound very cool with a deep roar coming from their engines. And most of the time also being much longer than European trucks, also being much bigger, producing more noise, and sometimes also being much older. It was really a big difference to see that these kind of trucks were driving down here. And yeah, basically it also is quite straightforward, as yeah, Costa Rica is closer to the United States of America than it is to Europe, so therefore it is also safe to say that it's quite understandable that Costa Rica uses American trucks. Cars also were very different, with a small quantity of cars coming from Europe, as I said before, for example, the Europe brands, and also a big quantity of cars were coming from Asia, such as Japan and even China. And basically, Japan and somewhat China is not that strange anymore, as in Europe, we also have an upcoming trend of Chinese vehicles, and Japanese vehicles have basically always been there. But the amount of Chinese vehicles really was a somewhat big difference. Um, and it was very interesting to see because in Europe, we don't, especially in the Netherlands, we don't have that much Chinese vehicles driving yet. The biggest one would be the BYD, Build Your Dreams. But cars and vans, such as this JAC Sunray, which looks a lot like an older Mercedes-Benz Sprinter, I have never seen one of these in the Netherlands before. Or like this BYD S6, which is also a Chinese car I've never seen before, even though BYD is an upcoming brand in the Netherlands. So it was really just a completely different world of cars. Another BYD I have never seen before was the BYD F0, which basically first was called the BID F1. And at first, the first time I saw it, I saw the back end of the car. And basically, it was basically a small look on the car. And I thought in the first case, oh, well, that's awesome that they have Toyota Aygoes over here. Because in Europe and in the Netherlands, we have dozens of Toyota Aygoes, Peugeot 107 and 108s, and Citroën C1s. Um, but yeah, that's basically all about it. So it was just a quick understatement that I thought that it was one of these. But later I saw it was a completely different car because the lines of the car of the side looked the same because it was on the same wheelbase and chassis, but the rear and the front of the car were completely different, basically being a rebadge of the Toyota Aygo with the same engine and various parts of the interior also being the same, which you can see here. Although the Toyota Aygo is extremely popular in Europe with the other models, as I said before, I only saw one of these cars driving out in Costa Rica, probably because of the high import rates. And even at that point, I would never understand why somebody would even import a car like this, because in my opinion, with the cars we had, the only capable cars that get you from point A to point B outside of cities like San Jose would be somewhat cars with a V6 that have enough power to even be able to drive on these mountain roads, as they could be so very steep. As a tourist, my point of view will be pretty straightforward and based on what I've seen. And since I've been here for 2 weeks, it might not be completely true of what the exact viewing point of whole Costa Rica is. But I still wanted to share my point of view of these 2 weeks that I've been there. So here is my point of view on some cars that you can see there, like the Citroën C1 is in Europe. Probably the most common basic vehicles you'd see there are these kind of cars. In my opinion, the Nissan Sentra basically being the B12 sometimes, but most of the times being the B13 and B14, being visible on almost every single street, either being normal or being owned by somebody who makes it, who just wants to make it look cool and somewhat tuned. Um, the Nissan Sentra was a car I wasn't actually familiar with, as in the Netherlands the car was named Nissan Sunny B12, B13 or B14, and these Sentras were made from 1986 to 1990 for the B12, which basically you could see sometimes, but the generations we're talking about with viewing point would be the B13, which was made from 1990 to 1994, or the B14, which was basically seen the most, made from 1994 to 1999. I did somewhat recognize these cars, but I couldn't really place them in the correct place, without doing extensive research on the internet, on Wikipedia. And I find these cars, especially the B14, very good looking cars. I would say um, they somewhat have a representative viewing point and optics, as for example the Nissan Primera from the Netherlands. And besides this car, a car I also saw everywhere was the Toyota Echo. Also somewhat a car I recognized some styling cues of, but I couldn't really place it. Basically, in my opinion, this is a very somewhat first generation Toyota Yaris, which we have in the Europe. And basically, it was like a small sedan variant. At first, the first time I saw a Toyota Echo, I actually thought it was the first generation Toyota Prius. But at some point, when I saw basically dozens of them driving a day, I thought to myself, is that even possible that these still are the same Priuses, which in the Netherlands you don't even see driving around anymore? And basically, yeah, I said before, it is a somewhat Toyota Yaris, but a sedan-like variant in my opinion, as these cars are also very popular over here. And I have only seen the pre-facelift variant. I also later found out on the internet, do you have a facelift variant of these? I also only saw the pre-facelift variant. And basically it was the successor of the Toyota Tercel and was made between 2000 to 2005. Speaking of the Toyota Tercel, the 1990 to 1994 Toyota Tercel L40 I also saw a lot. Going from basic trims with square headlights basically being the base US spec, to these higher trims with even AC, which is in my opinion very interesting to see a 31-year-old car at least with air conditioning. Um, Although the Toyota Tercel was delivered in the Netherlands, as the name actually did ring a bell to me, this was not this generation, as the last generation Tercel that was delivered to the Netherlands was the L20, 2 generations prior, which was made until 1987. And basically, besides the Toyota Tercel, the somewhat less regular traffic car, I'd say, is the Toyota Corolla E90, made from 1988 to 1992. And basically, this was the only model which was not entirely new to me, as we did have these Corollas in the Netherlands. But in my opinion, it is still very cool to see an at least 33-year-old car, being around quite a lot in a country like this. Besides these common city road traffic cars, people also drive a lot of SUVs and other bigger cars than the previous cars I mentioned. And although not being entirely bigger, but a car worth mentioning since it is quite new is the Toyota or the Suzuki Jimny, which was pretty much everywhere in cities, in mountains, near beaches, everywhere. Although these cars are also normal and common in Europe, this basically is pretty much all about this car. Besides the Jimny, a newer car I also saw a lot was a car that we don't actually have in Europe, the Suzuki Espresso, which basically is a smaller, somewhat crossover looking car, aimed to be very cheap. And in my opinion whatsoever, I looked this car up online and I saw that the price started at $16,500, which in my opinion, $16,500 for this car definitely is not cheap. And bigger popular SUVs than these cars were the first generation Toyota RAV4s being produced from 1994 to 2000s. I also saw dozens of these driving around. And for those wanting a bit bigger, Isuzu, which was at some point owned by GM, is also really seen a lot, especially these Isuzu Troopers, with the first generation being from 1981 to 1991 and the second generation being from 1991 to 2002, which was also sold as Opel, Holden and the Vauxhall Monterey worldwide. And basically both of these generations are still somewhat widely visible on the mountain roads, which in my opinion actually is very interesting to see, since the first generation has been made at least 34 years ago, really somewhat showing the quality of these cars. Besides the Suzuki Jimny and the Suzuki Espresso, also the smaller Daihatsu Terios is a big hit on these roads, made between 1997 to 2005 for the first generation, which basically is less common and less seen on the roads. The generation I'm specifically talking about is the 2006 to 2016 second generation, which basically is more common throughout the country, mostly seen in cities, but also somewhat seen on the roads in the mountains. Also, the car, like the Suzuki Vitara, is also a big hit on the roads. The first and the second generation, the most. The first generation was made between 1989 to 1999, and this generation also was available as the rebadge Chevrolet Tracker, which is basically the most common rebadge, but you also have the rare Geo Tracker, which basically is a sub-brand made by Chevrolet or General Motors, which you can also see every now and then, as I have also seen a Suzuki Swift, but the Geo rebrand. The second generation is also somewhat common, but a little less than the first generation, being made between 1999 to 2005. I have not even seen one car of the third generation of the Suzuki Vitara, but I have seen some cars of the fourth generation being made between 2015 and the present. And basically, besides these cars, for the wealthier Costa Ricans, you also have the Toyota Land Cruisers. Basically, these cars are more expensive and somewhat more expensive to purchase and more expensive to keep maintenance of, and therefore they are also little bit less common. Besides these SUVs, Costa Ricans also love pickups. In my opinion, mostly Asian, with also smaller Chevrolet pickups, for example, but mostly Asian. A lot of Isuzus, Nissans, Mitsubishis, and Toyotas, simply because these are bulletproof. This is also one of the reasons why you see a lot of older pickup trucks driving around, because these are easier to work on, as most of these trucks are from the late 80s to late 90s. But in my opinion, you also see this newer pickup truck from Isuzu introduced in 2002 a lot as well. You don't really have that much big American USA pickup trucks like a Dodge Ram and other huge pickup trucks. They mostly are just workhorses, especially for Isuzu, like the Isuzu pickup trucks, as people really tend to just have smaller pickup trucks, but mostly Asian or small USA pickup trucks. As said before, I also saw some European cars, like these Peugeot partners, although I only found the newer generation, but I also found out that you have the first generation as well. And also I had seen, I think, around 4 or 5 Peugeot 206s, which is basically the most of a foreign European car I saw. And I even saw a Renault Megane. But this was only once in San Jose. And every now and then you also see a BMW driving, as I did see some electric BMWs, some X5s, X3s, and some older E36s. And I also saw some Volkswagens, for example, the Jettas, and I think 2 Golfs, and a handful of Mercedeses, for example, the E-Classes, the W124 E-Class, and also the W212, I think, or 211. But basically, that's all about it. All European cars altogether could be around 20, 25 in 2 weeks, which actually is just a very small amount. Besides these European cars, like Volkswagen, for example, a very interesting Volkswagen I saw it multiple times, but was not even a passenger car, nor was it produced for Europe, but it was this truck, the Volkswagen Constellation, made in Brazil. Although these trucks are not very common, I did see this truck a handful of times driving around, as basically truckers here tend to go for more power and bigger trucks, as these trucks, as I saw online, had at most 320 horsepower, but basically this is like an in-between truck, in between heavy-duty vans and just the big trucks on themselves. These are basically made since 2005, and the only model I saw was the 26.260 with a 260 horsepower diesel engine, and I think these even were 6-speed manuals. Other European cars like Opel are not sold here. Yeah, basically my big interest goes out to Opels, but there are a few for sale online in Costa Rica. But I haven't seen one driving, although I did see a Chevrolet Corsa of the Opel Corsa B1 sitting on a junkyard. As said before, I did find some Opels for sale in Costa Rica, but just for a quick comparison from the prices are quite ridiculous, as the cheapest Opel car, for example, would be this Corsa from 2016. As you can see, this is the price in colones, and calculated to euros, this would be around 6,300 euros, which is just insanely expensive in my opinion for a 9-year-old Corsa, which would at most cost around 4,000 euros in Europe. And even more expensive it is for a country in which the salaries are already much lower than in Europe. Of the Opels, you did see some rebrands, as said before, like the Isuzu Trooper, which is the Opel Monterey, and the Isuzu Pickup, which is the Opel Campo. And you did see the Chevrolet Spark a few times being built the same as the Opel Karl, but basically that is about it. Electric cars are also quite noticeable on the streets. I did not even, it did not even occur to my mind that in Costa Rica, especially, a lot of interesting cars and even EVs would be somewhat suitable for the market. But later, as I learned that these have green license plate, the electric vehicles, you actually could see that basically a lot of electric vehicles were driving around, especially Chinese electric vehicles, as these are much cheaper than the other imported EVs. This basically is because Costa Rica is leading in Central America's green mobility revolution, as the government has set ambitious goals to decarbonize transport by 2050, aiming to, for most persons and vehicles, be electric or zero emissions. And basically this is actually somewhat realistic, because Costa Rica generates over 99% of its electricity from renewable sources, for example hydro, wind or solar. And the number of electric vehicles has grown substantially in mid-2024 to about 16,531 electric vehicles reported in circulation, which actually, in my opinion, is quite a lot. In 2023, the country even imported so many new energy cars that the figure exceeded the total imports of vehicles from such from 2018 to 2022. And it is reported that 70%, as said before, I said that a lot of Chinese vehicles were somewhat getting the electric vehicle market. 70% of these are from Chinese manufacturers. And that's basically pretty much all the things I can say about the Costa Rican car industry, which I could find about in just 2 weeks that I've been there. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to be able to like and subscribe for more, and in order to be able to upload more videos in the future, please consider becoming a member on my channel or sending a super thanks on this video. Don't forget to check out this playlist with many interesting videos covering various parts of the automotive industry, and I will see you in the next video.